Hi, everybody. Good morning. Thank you for coming to this breakout session on user experience. My name is Sean Wirtis. I'm a Senior Director of Product Design and UX at Pegasystems. My team is responsible for the design and usability of all of our applications and the platform. And with me is Amos Wagon, who's Director of UX at Pegasystems, and he is charged with usability and design for the platform itself, for the Pega platform. Today we're going to talk about the curse of bad UX, the state of enterprise application UX. We're going to focus mostly on traditional enterprise applications, not the ones that we're seeing increasingly are focused to customers, directly to customers. This is more traditional enterprise applications. We're going to try to understand why traditionally and currently so many of these applications are terrible, horrible, evil, bad. And we're going to make a case for why investing in UX is critical to your business and to your businesses. We're going to talk a little bit about the Pega experience and how we go about doing this. And we're also going to introduce something new today, which is called OOOO. So it's a new metric that we think can enable teams to drive UX into enterprise applications and make them a success.
Hi, everybody. My name is Amos Wagon, as Sean presented me. I'm a designer at Pega, and Pega is a company that makes enterprise application, and I don't find it obvious. In fact, if you look at the landscape of enterprise applications, for the most part, you'll find this collection of horrible user interfaces with minimal or no investment in user experience. While if you take a step and look at consumer applications, you would find something completely different. You'd find amazing experiences. So the question that we will try to answer today is why there's such a gap? Why there's such amazing investment in UX in consumer applications, while applications that we spend 8 hours every day in and day out, get no UX attention at all? And remember that consumer applications, most of them, you interact with them maybe a few minutes per week. And a good way to start to understand why this gap is to look at the R metric framework. So for those of you who are not familiar with the R metric framework, the R metric framework was coined by Dave McClure and quickly adopted by the Lean Startup movement. And the acronym simply stands for acquisition, activation, retention, referral, and revenue. And the idea is pretty simple. Each one of these words stands for a milestone of a user interaction with a product or a service. And the idea that Dave is talking about is if you optimize each one of these milestones, you'll be able to move your users through this funnel from the acquisition, and eventually you'll end up with a successful product that generates revenue for your business. And to better understand this, let's look at an example. So many of us are using Uber, and whether you like it or not, it has amazing customer experience. Try to think about your experience with Uber, about the first time you heard about it. You may have heard about it from a friend or an ad. You went to the App Store, you downloaded Uber. That's the acquisition piece. And then you got this form, right? Enter your phone number, and bang, where to? No complicated sign-up forms. Nobody asked for your payment method. Completely friction-free sign-up process. And that's the activation part. And then you used it over and over, and you saw that the user experience and the overall experience that they provided is far superior than traditional cab ordering. So you used it, and that's the retention piece. And at some point, you may have received the promo that you may refer a friend and maybe get free rides. And that's the referral piece. And you went and you created organic growth for Uber just by doing that. And as I mentioned before, they optimize each one of these milestones. So now you are a customer generating revenue for Uber. So if the R metric framework is so great, why enterprise applications still look like this? So if you look carefully again at those milestones for enterprise don't really mean the same thing. And remember that our user base are our employees, vendors, partners, maybe other businesses. We don't get them from the App Store. They go through HR or other methods. And the activation, retention, it's not something that even is done in the applications that we provide for them. And so goes for referral and revenue. So we're gonna introduce another way to optimize your applications, and Sean's gonna talk about this. Thank you.
So again, obviously, customer-facing screens should follow the R metric. Dave McClure, who's a famous venture investor, he demands that companies that he invests in understand each step in the R metric. But again, as Amos said, those market forces don't exist in the same way for enterprise applications. So what can we do to drive better design into our enterprise applications? So OOOO, or OOOO, I think would be better. Let's go through each of these O's in OOOO. The first O in the OOOO metric, and I'm going to keep saying OOOO in this sort of strange, silly way so that you'll remember it. By the way, the R metric is often referred to as pirate metric, since it sounds like R. But so we're going from R to OOOO. Okay, anyway. The first O is onboarding, which is training. Huge cost to the enterprise, massive cost. I read the other day that it takes 40 to 60% of an employee's salary to onboard and train them, typically, which is a huge cost. That's something that we can measure. We can measure whether or not one needs a lot of training to use an enterprise application or not. The second O in the OOOO metric is operation. And this one is just simply productivity and efficiency and lack of errors, right? More accurate. The third O in the OOOO metric is observation. So this is a critical piece. We need to be able to make sure that our applications are observable. We want to make sure that, on the one hand, that we don't need extra supervision for people to use it, but we want to understand how they're using it. And part of the reason that we want to understand how is related to the last O, which is not coming for some reason. There we go. Optimization. So this is about iteratively improving your applications. Unless we observe things, we have no way of knowing what to do next, right? We should optimize and improve and update both on understanding that we can lower the amount of training, the onboarding, and improve the productivity, right, and the efficiency of the application. So let's look at an example of how we could actually measure this in dollars. Let's say we have a large organization of 20,000 employees, and they are doing a common task 60 times in an 8-hour day. This is just math. It's not very complicated. If we reduce the time of that task by 30 seconds with better UX, and I would argue that's the only way that you can improve that, you save a half an hour per employee, which is 10,000 people hours per day. So that's the equivalent of over 1,300 employees working for you essentially for free. That's enormous value, right? So it's critical that software teams understand this and understand this is what they're trying to achieve. It's not simply about making something work. It's about making something work that actually drives value in the business. And again, we can measure this. UX is measurable. This is actually what UX really looks like. It's measured in quantitative data. In other words, I can test to see if a task took less time or produced fewer errors. And I can keep testing, and I can keep tweaking the design until I get something. Ideally, and I'll tell you a little bit more about how we do this at Pega, we test during the design process so that we're not actually investing development time in a bad design. We also want to test and measure the qualitative values of an application. And this is actually surprisingly important. Employees bring in their expectations about the great consumer software experiences they have into the workplace. And we know that if you give somebody bad tools, they're probably going to leave, and there's employee churn, and that, again, is extremely expensive with the training and onboarding. This is another famous story in the UX world. This is called the $300 million button. This is, some of you may know this, this is a very famous online retailer who happens to be a Pega customer. This was the screen that you saw after you had filled your shopping cart of products and you were about to check out. You got this. And this was actually very standard for the day. This was a standard approach. Simply, if you had a relationship, an account with the retailer, you would enter your username and password and continue. And if you didn't, you had a button that said register now. So this was considered a normal and good design of its time. But they started to, again, iteratively see how they could make this better. What they started to notice was that the abandonment rate on this screen was surprisingly high. And they made one change. This is called the $300 million button change. And that's what they did. They changed register now to continue. So that meant less friction to finishing the transaction. What they found was, interestingly, that even people who had a username and a password but had forgotten it, or for whatever reason, simply clicked continue. So they were able to, I believe in the first month they rolled this out, $15 million in the first month. In the first year, an additional $300 million on top of where they had been previously in revenue. So very simple design change, but very critical. This is from a white paper published by another software company. They stated that for every $1 they invested in design, they saved $10 in development and $100 in post-release maintenance. So the general ROI, the return on investment for UX design industry-wide, is always positive. It's an amazing statistic. For every dollar, it's usually $2 to $100 back. So pretty good. But we're going to argue it's not really about just having a design. You have to do this correctly. Apologies for anyone who's seen this image 20,000 times, but it's still incredibly valuable. If you don't research a design, if you're not doing your diligence, the due diligence for the design, and Amos is going to talk about what that really means, you end up something like this, right? It did not really do much for the actual user here. There was a design, but it's a fail. And it's an expensive fail, because now they have to dig up that whole thing and redo it, right? So Amos is going to talk to us a little bit about the 3 pillars of user experience design.
So to start understanding user experience, we need to understand the main disciplines of user experience. And we like calling them the 3 pillars of design and of UX. And those are conceptual model, visual design, and interaction design. Let's start with conceptual model. Conceptual model is the way that us as humans explain systems and processes to ourselves in our brain. Usually we highly simplify them. And think about cooking, right? So you want to cook dinner, and you have to think about something that you want to cook, and you have to recall if you have the ingredients in the refrigerator, and you have to recall all the steps that you need to take. Retrieve the ingredients from the pantry, refrigerator, retrieve the cutting boards, the knives, cut, stir. There's an awful lot of things to know. There's an awful lot of information. And the worst part about it, we have to store all this information in our brain. the cognitive load is just enormous. And in essence, good UX offloads some of this information from our brain to the software. And let's look at one conceptual model. Kitchens designs has evolved to something like this. It's an array of anonymous cabinet doors. They don't reveal the content. It's very secretive. But yet, and if you think about them, they're completely non-intuitive. You bring strangers into your kitchen and you ask them to find the cutting board, they'll probably fail miserably. But again, kitchen designs are extremely efficient. They store hundreds of objects, and they support hundreds of activities that we can take. We can cook dinner again, we can load the dishwasher, we can arrange the groceries, we can make tea. How did they do that? They simply work because we arrange them ourselves. And by arranging them ourselves, we obtain this mental mapping where things are stored in our kitchen. And we know exactly where to retrieve them and what's the most efficient way or the optimized routes to retrieve them when we are engaged in our activities. And we all experienced some version of the mother-in-law effect when she comes into your place, she wants to do you a favor, and she arranges the kitchen. You'll probably never find your favorite mug again. So if kitchens...
Everyone nods. Yes.
Yeah, they know it's good. So if kitchen conceptual model is so great, imagine a situation where your designer comes to you and said, we're working on this project, I have this brilliant idea, it's inspired by kitchen's designs, and it looks something like this. You'll probably be very disappointed with this design. But he's going to continue and explain, our users will be able to arrange things themselves, they'll obtain a mental mapping, and they'll retrieve information quickly and know where to find all the activities. You still won't be very satisfied, but is this really wrong conceptual model? In some cases, it works very efficiently. If you think about iOS and Android home screens, they work for us only because we arrange them ourselves. And sometimes, even in Windows. So now let's talk about visual design. So visual design is about applying shapes and colors and typography to increase the usability of a product. And by visual design, we don't mean decoration. Just like the pattern and shapes and colors on these butterfly wings, they serve a functional purpose. They keep predators away. And now we're gonna do a short exercise. I'm gonna switch to the next screen. I'm gonna ask you to find some piece of information on the screen. And then we're gonna see how visual design can completely transform information. So get ready. What's the payment date? Shout it. How much time did it take?
3 or 4 seconds, at least.
Okay, that's pretty good. Good audience. So let's see how we do some visual manipulation to completely increase the readability of this information. So first of all, we can add some actions. We can group information by related content. We can arrange them horizontally because there's no real hierarchy to it. We can put labels on top to increase the readability of information. We can space things out and change the typeface to something more readable on digital screens. We can change the weight of the labels to increase, again, the readability of the information. And we can increase the size of the most critical information here. We can change background colors and replace repeated actions with just icons. What's the payment date? That's very obvious, right? And just very simple manipulation. This is the before, and this is the after. Let's talk about the third pillar, and that's the interaction design. And with interaction design, we mean the way our users actually operate the application or the product. And I like this metaphor of the handheld tools because just by looking at them, touching them, holding them, we really understand how they work. And I argue that a Neanderthal can hold this hammer and understand exactly where to hold it and what part hits a nail. And with interaction design, we have a few tools in our toolkit. And the first one is transitions. And look at this brilliant macOS transition. Without it, it's going to be almost impossible to know how to, where this window has disappeared and how to retrieve it. And this very simple animation reveals so much information. We know that it's a button. We know that it's a phone call. We know exactly how to operate it. And we know, and the animation also draws our attention to it. And obviously, we're also talking about traditional inputs, like sliders and drop-downs, radio buttons, checkboxes. And last but not least, accessibility. How we enable multiple ways of interacting with content and actions for people with disabilities.
So now I'll briefly talk a little bit about process, because there are, again, these pillars, these three critical pillars in UX design. But it's also, maybe even more importantly, about the process on how you actually do this design. So this is an enormous topic, and we're not going to cover it in enormous detail here, although I know that a lot of customers are often very interested in this. We're going to talk briefly about how Pega does this. So Pega uses a method we call Agile UX, and the critical thing is that it's very collaborative. It involves a UX designer, a stakeholder, like a product owner typically, a product manager, and somebody from the dev team. And this is the group that will design the feature or the application. This is not a thing specific to Pega. Actually, a lot of companies do this. I know Google does this, and Apple does this. Apple calls this group a startup, is what they call it. We don't really have a name for it, but yet. I think we used to call it a pod or something for a while, but no one used that. But anyway, the idea here is that this collaborative group does this design. The idea of the collaboration is that we add multiple viewpoints to that design, and we believe that when you get to the development stage, everyone is on board. Everyone understands what they're doing and why. The second piece of this is the iteration. This needs to be very iterative. This needs to happen fast in a kind of agile way. So we use the whiteboard as our primary tool initially, and then we immediately validate whether or not we are succeeding in solving the business problem that we're trying to solve. So we establish what the business problem is, and then we see if we can solve that problem with the design. And we're validating as we go. So that's why it says try, test, and repeat. So the other thing that we've done at Pega is create a design system. And this is enormously beneficial to our team. Smashing Magazine says that design systems speed up your team's workflow, allowing you to launch more stuff while saving huge amounts of time and money in the process, something that I think we all would like to do. So that's the reason why we've done this. A design system is a pattern library. We publish ours on design.pega.com. I invite you to take a look at that. It also renders in the technology, in the Pega platform, in our so-called UI kit as a layer, an application layer. So what do we mean by a pattern library? We mean a description or a series of rules that define everything on the screen. And that includes small things, such as UI elements, buttons. So it's not just what a button looks like or what a button should say, but when a button should be used versus a link, and if you're using that button, where it would go on the screen, right? So a series of rules. And it can be down to these nitty-gritty things on spacing. This is outside our offices in Cambridge. We've printed out every screen that we produce, and we're looking for inconsistencies here. And we have this process where we go through this. It's extremely detailed. I don't know if you can see, but there's even a line here, a row here about the tone of voice for voice readers, for screen readers, for people who are visually impaired. So incredibly detailed, but also incredible high level too. We're also looking for the complete workflow and user flow. So I think I'm very proud to say that I think our design system is now the most complete in the industry, which is a very exciting thing, including this new chart library, which is coming out soon. So again, design patterns can also include entire workflows. So what do we mean by design patterns? And we'll use this example here, which some of you may be familiar with, TurboTax. Does anyone actually use TurboTax? It's a pretty amazing piece of software. It takes an incredibly onerous and complicated process, which is filling out your federal your taxes, and it makes it simple. And how does it do it? It does it by a very guided process of asking you questions, very simple questions. As you answer those questions, you move through these sections. And once you get through a section, you're always back to an overview. So you see where you are in that process. That's what I mean by a design pattern. That's design. The success of TurboTax is its UX. That's the value. But it's not necessarily the best design pattern for everybody. If I'm a tax professional, for instance, TurboTax would be ridiculously slow. In that case, I might want a piece of software that more mimics a traditional form, right? So the context of the user is critical in this. And that's something, again, you have to test.
So let's look at a case study at Pega, and we're going to look at the design pattern for a complete use case for medical claims. But we're going to examine it through the lens of the OOOO metrics that we introduced before. And a little bit about medical claims. Most of us know a little bit about this. So we go to a medical provider, we get a procedure. It can be either the hospital or a lab or a doctor. And this provider wants to get money for it. So they file a claim, and the insurer will pay them. Now, these insurers, they get thousands of claims every day, and most of them are automatically approved or denied. But many of them are routed to a human operator. They're called claim examiners. And typically what this claim examiner will see is something like this. This is a very common piece of software that is used for adjudication claim. And you see the picture. Claims are extremely complex information. There's a lot of information. There are thousands of fields there. The fields that information is coming from the claim, and there are other regulations and service and systems and benefits and policies that you need to compare it with. And this software expects the human operator to know exactly where the information is stored. So if they need to retrieve information, it may be hidden under a tab or a window or a tab within this window. And we were talking before about the cognitive load. So the cognitive load is enormous. But it's even worse when these claims have issues on them that a human operator needs to solve. They typically get some error message with a list of errors that were found with the code and maybe a description. But they need to remember how to solve it. They need to remember what information created this issue and how to solve it. So again, this is a very inefficient conceptual model. So what we try to do in Pega is to solve some of these issues, and we measured it and we optimized it through the OOOO metric framework. And first, let's look at the onboarding. So claim examiners, it's a tough job, and I don't think they are highly rewarded, and they're working off quota. They have to adjudicate up to 50 claims per day. So they need to, and the churn is high. They need to learn a lot before they become efficient. And it's very clear that this metaphor requires them to create this mental mapping that takes a lot of time to obtain. So what we try to do with our smart claim redesign is create a one-page screen that will give you all the highly critical information of the claim at a glance. So it's not all the information, but it's everything that you need to know about this claim, and you can see the large font there for the claim amount. But this is not such a radical design. We didn't have to go far to draw inspiration from, and we just looked at the traditional paper form of claims, and it's very similar. It's just the most critical information is on the paper form. The sections are very clearly identified. But obviously with our digital system, if you need to retrieve more information about the provider, just click on the link and you see more information about the provider. So it's obvious that learning to navigate information is much easier with a system like this, and we measured it, and we were successfully able to reduce by up to 90% the onboarding time for new users' tasks. And that means that they learn the system in 1/10 of the time that they would do with another system or a previous system. Next, let's look at the operation, and that's the productivity. That's how we get our users productive, efficient, and reduce errors. And the task of adjudicating claim when issues are found on a claim, it's very complicated. And you saw before the cognitive load and how many things these people need to remember. But what we did here, when an issue comes up with a claim, we create these, what we call the guided adjudication frames. And what we do here, we show the error, we show the issue, but we also retrieve all the most relevant information for this issue on this experience. So we look at the claim and we bring all the information that caused this issue. We also look at the system of record. In this case, it's a mismatched information, so you can easily compare it. And on top of that, we add the most common or most likely actions to take. So we call, again, this experience the guided adjudication experience, but the nice thing about this is that every single issue, every single type of issue has its own UI and flow to it. So it's very easy to be productive. The users can still navigate the claim and find the information, but in most cases they don't need to, and we saved probably more than 30 seconds that Sean gave in his example before, just by doing this. And again, even here we saw a dramatic improvement in productivity. Users are able to adjudicate more claims faster, up to more than 3 times than before. And next, let's talk about observation. And with observation, we built into the platform capabilities that allow us to observe how users actually interact with our application. And the first one is the Pega Workforce Intelligence. And Pega Workforce Intelligence gives us multiple dimensions of how users actually operate the application. And you're probably familiar with web analytics tools where you can track where they click and what screens they visited. This is just one dimension that Pega Workforce Intelligence provides. It also provides how they interact with the application in the context of their desktop. So how much time they spend on Pega claims versus the legacy system, or even Outlook, or even Facebook. And on top of that, you can benchmark and compare it with KPIs that apply to your business. So in claims, it can be how many claims were resolved, or what's the average handle time. In customer service, it could be NPS and others. And you guys are all invited to the Tech Pavilion to look at these capabilities. You can see information on the aggregate, you can see information on the individual user level, and that's, Sean mentioned it before, that's key for the next step, which is the optimization, how we drive real insights and make changes that can improve onboarding and operation. And optimization is, again, where Pega Platform really shines, and we introduced lots of capabilities that allow business users and administrators and users that know the business better than the underlying technology to make changes rapidly. So first is the Agile Workbench, where users can see an issue on the screen or suggest a change and just right there log it, and they can sync it with any project management tool of their liking. And of course, Pega Express, where business users can make changes to user interface, process, logic, and data right there in the application. So, and you guys are all invited to the playground area to play with these capabilities. So by establishing a successful working user experience paradigm and application that works, the beauty of having a pattern library for complete use cases is that you can now apply it to anywhere that claims are being used. So we started with medical claims, and we apply it to manufacturing and warranty claims, and also to home and insurance and other insurances type claims.
So this is what we mean by a sort of reuse of a design pattern. And essentially our vision at Pega is to provide our customers with this pattern library for entire workflows that are common in businesses. And that's what we would like to achieve, and we're working in that direction. So we've obviously, I think, done a pretty good job with something like adjudication of claims. But I want to go back in time a little bit, something sort of shocking. This is Pega 4 years ago. I don't know if anyone's still using the 6 series, but hopefully not. But I show this because to show the incredible transformation and the velocity that we've been able to move in really getting a grip on UX. And I think this can be maybe, hopefully, a model for our customers as well. This is what our IDE looked like. This is very typical of, enterprise software at the time. And this is what our end user applications look like out of the box. Well, some of them look like this. So there was no consistency whatsoever, right? And this is where we are today. I think it's a great story, and I'm very proud of it. I do think that it is hopefully a good model of how we've been able to elevate design to a strategic level, to develop a metric and a method, a process for building applications that do better work. And that's really, these applications look nice, and that's nice, but the main thing is that they're much more efficient and productive to use. So I think we have enough time, probably, to go over some questions, if anyone has some. Otherwise, thank you. Yes? Wait, we have a microphone.
Talking through this user experience, with the Agile methodology, nowadays everyone wants to deliver quickly, fail fast, learn from that, and then obviously reiterate through that, right? So we were also asked to deliver the minimum viable product, just the obvious functionality to be delivered at the first.
Yeah.
And then, it would be tested by process owner, core owners of the process. And when it's actually exposed to the whole world across the organization, then people will have lots of feedback, right? And then taking that iteration back to the development takes a lot of time.
Right.
I mean, how do you handle that?
So I think the question is, when you get a lot of stakeholder feedback, I'll put those in quotes. So here's the thing about stakeholders. Stakeholders believe that they know a solution. They've envisioned a solution. They think that they understand how to solve a problem. Part of the thing that we've done at Pega, and we probably don't have enough time to talk about how this was done in the last 4 or 5 years, but you need to be able to get stakeholders to accept the fact that UX is a science that will drive results, and that they don't know what they're talking about, basically. And the other thing, yes, exactly. And I will say this, and this is something that I say often in a loud, angry voice, and I'm probably disliked through much of Pega because of this, but I say, I don't care about your opinion. I'm sorry, I just don't. I care about actual results. And you have to stick with that. We have to be, as an application building community, we have to understand that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to make good things, that do good things, that help people, right? Enterprise applications, as Amos said, are used sometimes 8 hours a day or 9 hours a day by people who make their living. I think the least we could do is make it an efficient, productive experience that doesn't give them a headache. So yeah, so the reality is that stakeholders simply think they know because they already have. You'll often, I always hear this. What we really need is some tabs and a button that does. No, you're designing it, And how do you know that's the correct design? So it is hard, and there's no easy answer for that. But one of the things is to elevate design in the organization, to associate it continually with the strategic interests of the business. Yes?
You're really going in the right direction.
Thank you.
My question centers around the TurboTax situation.
Yeah, the example.
And at the end, you showed the more complex form. And I'm Steve Woodworth from Intel. And
Yeah.
in our internal applications, we have the newer employees that need that hand-holding. And we have the experts that it's
Yeah.
just getting in their way.
Yep.
What would you say to deal with that?
Do you want to take that one?
I can tell you that everyone appreciates simple experience, even your most savvy developers. The claim example shows you incredible amount of information, and we managed to make it readable. But the TurboTax example is also gives you a hint that a solution it's very specific to the context of where it's been applied. So filing tax through a web form or through TurboTax, the outcome is the same, but the users and the situation is completely different. So in your case, one of the metaphors or the paradigms that we use in Pega, and you can see it with the Pega Express, is that it's the same solution, but we surface some simple things to business users. But if you need, you can dig in and explore and get more. So it's not different variation of the same thing. We just expose the most relevant things to your maybe less savvy users. And if your more experienced users need to explore everything, it's there, it's right there.
But I do think there's, my guess, without knowing the specific use case, is that the simple version is actually too simple and too guided. But I think the point is that you would have to make a calculation, really a figure, understanding how much are we producing, how much is it worth to have experienced users be much more productive versus the training, right? So if you present something that is for experienced users very efficient, very productive, you're going to probably have to do more training for people who are starting. That's a balance, but that can be measured, right? And whatever the dollar figure is in the end, that's the better dollar figure is what you want to go with. So that's kind of how I would answer that. Any other questions? Yes.
I was wondering, and maybe I missed it, if you guys have made enhancements to the listen grid. I work for JP Morgan, and everything is all about the datas and Excels and stuff showing in the grid format. So a lot of our users are asking if there's a way they can select their own columns.
Yeah, make their own columns and stuff.
Saving state, saving their own filters.
So we're going to talk, I'm not going to do too much on UI. I distinguish between UI, which is the technology that people interact with, and the user UX, which is their actual experience with that. They're obviously very connected. But I will say that there's a lot of work going on with the Pega tables. We're going to actually rename them tables because it turns out that's what everyone else has been calling them for all these years, not grids. But that specific feature, the ability to add columns, is on our list. I would expect to see that possibly in 7.3.1. Don't hold me to that, but it's not there now. I apologize for that. Yes. Here's the microphone's coming.
So we have projects migrated from older version to newer version. Mm-hmm. So the new functionality is built in latest technology in Pega. I mean, the screens look very fantastic, but the first 3 screens look like in the older version of 6.3. So when we migrate, we don't have enough tools to uplift the UI too.
So this is an older application that you updated to Pega 7, and some of the stuff that's new shows up from Pega 7, and everything that you've blocked from your layer is blocking.
So first 3 screens looks old, and from the 5th screen, it's like, wow.
Right. So I mean, usually what we tell people is just delete all the stuff that they did before and let us do it for you, because it's going to be better. I will say one of the things about this design system is not just simply about efficiency for the design process. It's actually for our customers as well. They can harness this. They can make little configuration changes. They can change colors and make their own design system, and then it will be consistent, because that's what we're doing. So essentially the point of the design system is that I can take a feature from one application and insert it into another, and it will just work. It will be visually consistent, but even more important, in that conceptual model, it will be logically consistent. So the button is where you'd expect it to be, et cetera.
I think we're out of time.
Yeah.
We will be here to take questions if you want, but thank you all for...
And also, we do have a UX design booth this year on the Tech Pavilion, and we'll probably be down there. So feel free to come by and talk about anything. Thanks.
Thank you.